Hi, everybody, and welcome back. It's great to see you today. The local time is 11:47 a.m. Pacific Time, and today's date is Thursday, January 16th, 2025. I'd say Happy New Year, but we're halfway through January, more than half. And we're halfway through the alphabet. More than half, technically, by a matter of a few minutes. So wonderful to be with you live. We have 250 who are live and standing by. It looks like we're loud and clear. Thank you for typing that in. And we will begin this program in 12 minutes or so. So for the many of you who are watching in the future, watching in replay, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, next decade, you can skip ahead. I'll have a chapter title ready to go for you, and it will say, Program Begins. But the program has not begun, and I'd like to say hi to a number of you. Where are you viewing from today? Kevin is in Hermiston, Oregon. Mark is in the United Kingdom. Dale is in Edmonton, Alberta. Kelly says, was just watching the Beacon Rock show. Oh, I guess they must have posted that one. Yeah, we're running out of new episodes for the Nick on the Rock series. Today, they posted the Beacon Rock episode, and I guess that means the last of the new episodes next week will be at Washington Pass and Liberty Bell. Bob is in Kamloops, BC. Patrick is in Elko, Nevada. Don is in Los Angeles, California. John is Kelowna, BC. Don is in Fairbanks, Alaska, where it's minus 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It's 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wasn't that like an hour ago. I went out for a long walk because I saw that the sun was about to come out. The sun is out, and I think some kind of little front has come in. And so we've gone from 27 degrees Fahrenheit to 43 degrees Fahrenheit. That's your weather report. I am going to go out and soak up the sun this afternoon, for sure. Bring a couple of papers with me and walk and read, and that's enough detail. Okay, great. More. Butteville, Oregon. Eugene, Oregon. Leamington Spa, UK. Groningen, the Netherlands. Portlandia, Blackfoot, Oregon. Tinley Park, Illinois. Lottie the Roddy checking in from just south of the Tukwila Formation. Tom will be using many of your photos today. Thank you for your help. John is in Woodland, Washington. I'm feeling particularly brisk with my mouth. I just jinxed it, but feeling razor sharp this morning. We'll see how long it lasts. Another John in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Kirk is in Sweden. Eddie from Three Dog Night. I'm not making that up. If you know that old band, Three Dog Night, Eddie, it was a former member, maybe even a founder of Three Dog Night. Eddie, we are among your celebrity here today. Kevin is in Fall City, Washington. Richard, Idaville, Oregon. Garrett, Laren, the Netherlands. I saw somebody, Teresa, I think, said, why does he say the Netherlands and shout all the time? I'm not mocking your country. I love the Netherlands. I don't even remember why I started doing that. Riley, Snohomish, Washington. Jan, Vancouver, Washington. Patrick's in Sweden. Oh, classes have let out. It's extra noisy out in the hallway. Yeah, I've got a closed-door policy this winter, which in retrospect, it was so ballsy of me to have an open door all of last winter when people are trying to work. Whatever. Okay, great. Well, I'm so glad that so many of you here. We're now approaching 500 live viewers. I have a couple of thank yous quickly before we get started today. And so you remember the M&M, the green M&M prop, and you remember this gift last week or even 2 weeks ago, where a rock was painted green. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name already. And even where you're from, was it Oregon, I guess? And so then I just love this. So thank you. And not to be outdone, a box arrived a couple days ago. Nick, hopefully this will help with triple junctions. Thanks. Henry. So Henry sent come on, baby. Unboxing video here. I should have planned ahead. Oh, she's all wired in there. I'll get her out. Thank you, Henry. That's very, very fun. And Docky. It's from Ryan Hollister, a geology instructor. Nick, hope you enjoy the new, I cannot pronounce that, tissue box cover. And there's a QR code that may work for your phone right now if you want to freeze frame this and zap it. It's a model topography. This is the Native American name for Mount St. Helens, and I don't want to butcher it if I try to say it out loud. So Ryan, I think, has a little business, maybe a side business, Ryan. Phaneritic, Geoscience Decor. And then Ryan added a very special note saying, I'm not the gifter, but I'm a big fan of your work. Thanks for all of your outreach. So thank you, anonymous viewer. If you want to identify yourself right now, that'd be fun. But Kleenex box. Created on a 3D printer, I presume. And quite possibly these exist for all the Cascade volcanoes. I don't know. Thank you, Ryan, creator of this, and thank you, anonymous gifter. I'm running out of room here. I guess we'll put it right next to Mount St. Helens proper. Very fun. How about a couple of quick more hellos before I take my walk? Couple more hellos to where are you viewing from? I'm going to scroll back, find a few things. Oh, you're all talking about the gifts. Ronald is in LaPorte, Minnesota. I'm back a ways. It's foggy and afraid of Washington. Mama told me not to come. That's right. That's a Randy Newman song redone by Three Dog Night, or maybe made popular by Three Dog Night. Mr. Morlock is in Lava Hot Springs. He made it, everybody. Okay, down to live. Saber, the birthplace of Mount Stewart. I get it, Saber. You're in Baja. Very clever. Andy, what a fun... Yeah, thank you. David's in Fairwood, Washington. Paul is in Glasgow, Scotland. Still want to get over there, Paul. I still want to get over to Scotland. We both do. Kent is in the Luss of Louisiana. Keith is in Mesa, Arizona. Eric is in Southwest Virginia. Julie, you're in the building? Am I going to see you on my little walk, Julie? Current geology student. Kristijan is in Maribor, Slovenia. Special hello to you. I'm not sure we've seen you before. If you're new, especially hello to you. Australia, and so on. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take my walk, give you a shout out the window. There's a lot to enjoy today. I hope you enjoyed today's program. It's a little bit more tame. No, that's the wrong word. I don't know. I'll figure out a word before we start. Thank you. We'll start in 5 minutes. Hot mic. All right, it's back to herky jerky. I don't get it. Don't obsess about it. Okay, how are you going to start? You're going to reset the alphabet. You're going to unveil the schedule with the disciplined approach for the rest of the month, right? You're going to get to the clockwise. Don't just don't. Okay? Just don't. Whatever you do, do not. Why don't you join the herky-jerky crowd? Go. Don't. Haley, don't. Yeah, it's downright windy out there. I love it. You gotta love it. A pleasant good afternoon to you all, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. This is the Cascades A to Z live stream series, and here we are in mid-January, about to start the second half of the alphabet. And as I mentioned last time, which was 5 days ago, there's a nice symmetry to our alphabet. It turns out that wasn't the plan originally, but the first half of the alphabet was setting the stage for the Cascade Volcanic Arc. In today's episode, entitled Early Days of the Cascades, I guess it could mean anything, but if you've been part of our series, you know what that means. We have arrived at 46 million years ago, and we're going to start looking at well-behaved Cascade Volcanic Arc generated magmas. That's a mouthful. And yeah, we're going to have a subducting oceanic plate. We're not going to name it because that's where we've been lately with the green M&M. But I'd like to frame a few things scheduling-wise to kind of keep myself on task. And then we will get into the chalkboard today, which is maybe a surprise to you. It's a surprise to me as well. I had a few other projects since I've last seen you, so I got started on this episode late. It wasn't until Tuesday morning, 48 hours ago, that I really started thinking about what I wanted to do today. And all I knew when I saw you last was that we would start with the blue. We would start with the magmas that were in the early days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, and we would go to Tamanous Rock and we would go to Granite Falls for sure. Those are the two field videos I did with Jeff Tepper, University of Puget Sound, this past summer. we're doing that, but we're not going to do that until Saturday. I have clockwise rotation again for some reason. I want to talk about the Grand Canyon. That's also confusing. In Arizona, what in the world am I talking about? Arundhanghe, Issaquah Alps. So all four of those things are kind of a surprise to me, but as the more I was thinking about it, I'm like, no, this makes sense. This is the time when we start thinking about the early days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. It's worth thinking about these four things. And you're like, why are we thinking about Arundhanghe? We're not thinking about her. I chatted with her yesterday by Zoom. So let me show you, if you haven't been to the website lately, let me show you nickzentner.com. And the Nick on the Rocks episodes continue to premiere, one a week. There's a Beacon Rock episode that just dropped, as the kids say, a couple of hours ago. But if we go to the Cascade Volcano Library, refresh, Arundhanghe visited with me for half an hour talking about the Puget Group and other sedimentary rocks and sedimentary formations in Washington. And Jamie McDonald dropped by for a 30-minute visit. Both of those were yesterday. And if you have forgotten why I'm doing these recorded interviews, it's almost like I feel like I want to call back to the very beginning of the alphabet back in early November, because we're halfway through. I thought this was going to be a visual alphabet, and we're returning to some of that today. There's a lot of roadside photos taken by many of the viewers, so that's coming. But I also thought we would kind of push a little bit towards ideas that were not fully developed and needed more work, or current work is happening. And the Arundhanghe clips today will show that she's got some plans to come up here and work on the early days of the Cascades, quote unquote. You'll see what I mean with our clips. But the 30-minute recorded Zoom interviews is a new way to involve geologists. The last 2 winters, maybe 3 winters, the last 3 winters, we would have live geologists here for 45 minutes or an hour, and it was just us being with them. I've gotten away from that for a number of reasons, and this new format where I'm taking these recorded clips and weaving them into some narrations is the latest attempt to try to make this unique and special and hopefully valuable for many, many people, whether you're in geology or not. Final opening comment. Okay, how do I say this without sounding like a jerk? I guess that's impossible. Okay, well, let me try anyway. I'm not satisfied when I am taken to an outcrop, or if I read a roadside book and I go to the outcrop that I'm curious about and they say, it's a porphyritic andesite. That's not enough for me. And I think for many, even in geology, that's fine. You were curious about it. You're told, or you've read now what that is. It's a porphyritic andesite. I didn't know that. That's a fact. And then you're like, good, my learning is done. Or maybe that's not enough, but if you're told what the name of the formation is, the Tukwila Formation, then that's good enough for you. Or maybe you're told some ages. Maybe it's the Tukwila Formation and the age ranges between 45 and 42 million years ago. I'm making up those numbers, by the way. That's the point today. That's still not enough for me. And all I'm trying to do in this series, if it's unclear to you, is go a step further. I'm not saying I'm better than everybody else. I'm just saying that I'm doing something that's very unusual, and I really like doing it this way. It feeds into my natural curiosity. And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm taking these little things and I'm stitching them together. We're going to do a lot of that, not only today, but I think we're going to do that the rest of the alphabet. I think we're going to fight through a bunch of names, dozens and dozens of formation names, group them by color, group them by sketches, continue to call back and continue to predict to the future, bring in people and to use the corny names or whatever, the corny colors. But it's just naturally what I'm interested in doing and have been for a long, long time. And I don't think a majority of geologists, and I don't think a majority of many of you naturally go in that direction. But you have been committed to this series to this point. You must see some value in it. And so I don't know why. I felt like I needed to say it out loud, but that is ultimately what I'm trying to do. And today, in the second half of the alphabet, we begin a bit more intentional effort to take all these snapshots, these little Polaroids laid out on a table, and organize them. And say, these 3 snapshots go together. In fact, these 3 snapshots are the same shit. Why are we calling it 4 different names with 3 different photos? Okay, good. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And I want to make a couple of quick shout outs. Is that what you say? I want to say a couple quick things, a couple of reminders, and a couple of messages. The beautiful photos that you may have noticed in the thumbnail. In other words, when I post one of these live streams, there's the title and then there's a photo as the backdrop. And then if you find this after the fact and you want to see episode K, there's that title slide. I want to remind you, and I did this the first episode, that viewer Martin gave me all these photos for free to use. So I'm just going through the little collection of Martin photos. Martin, thank you so much. I think I used this photo for today's thumbnail. They're not Gary Paul photos. They're not Lindsay photos. They're Martin photos, and just wanted to remind people of that. The other reminder is that my wife continues to do so well to the point where she drove herself up to Bellingham on Monday. That's a 3-hour drive to spend 3 days with our young grandson. So that's the newest way to communicate to people that things are going very, very well. Thanks again for your well wishes. But when I see people around town and they're like, oh my God, I haven't seen you since November. I heard this whole thing. And they don't know what is going on with Liz. That's been the latest thing. She drove herself up to Bellingham, hanging out with our grandkid. And she's going to go back to teaching part-time in a couple of weeks. So we are almost completely back to normal. Almost completely back to normal. And we are grateful. Okay, moving on. So last time we were together, we were thinking about what the name of the oceanic plate was when the birth of the Cascades, which is right now. And we're not revisiting that. I hope that you enjoyed that little foray, that's French, I think, into discussing the 2 tectonic models, whether we had the green M&M going north, the triple junction migrating north and getting the Farallon plate in place to start the volcanic arc, or if you were Mike Eddy and wanting a spreading ridge way down in southern Oregon, and then you jump that thing back to the north, and you transition from the Kula plate subducting to the Farallon plate subducting. We're past that. We're not doing that now. We are to the early days of the Cascades. Early days of the Cascades, 46 to 40. And this is our roadmap. More for Saturday, but a little bit again today. And I showed this one to you last time. So we're in this area here of light blue, light blue, light blue. Lindsay Malone, I hereby declare, you know this already because we emailed a couple days ago, I hereby declare 2 shades of blue. Lindsay's been asking for this for like 3 weeks. I don't know if you wanted this demarcation, but that's what we're doing, Lindsay. So from this point forward, I hereby declare that dark blue will be 52 to 46. You're like, 52? I thought 52 was orange. Well, I'm just looking for natural stories. And the rollback and the break off and many of those Jeff Tepper magmas started 52 and go to 46. So that's going to be dark blue. But we're done with that. The near trench magmas, most of those were blue. We're now to light blue, and light blue are the early days of the Cascades. Light blue is the early days of the Cascades. So we haven't looked at this in a while. We're still kind of in chapter 5 for these natural breaks in storylines, and we've got 2 more episodes to go in light blue. So I'm also putting pressure on myself to push this along. So let me show you and hold myself to this. This is my plan for the rest of January. And if I really get lagging behind, I guess I'll just make a new one of these. But I want to stay to this. So dark blue is 52 to 46. We're done with it. Here we are right now. I want to do 2 episodes on the light blue, 46 to 40 million years ago. Magmas, sedimentary units, and so on. A week from today, January 23rd and 25th, I want to do green. And you know what these colors are by now. I want to go to green. I want to go in the 30s. And unless there's an absolutely shocking surprise with green, I want to do 2 shows only with it. I want to get to red. I want to get to the roaring 20s. I know there's a bunch there. I know there's a bunch in red. And guess whose project is firmly in red? Michael Eddy and Isla from Stanford. The Spirit Lake Pluton project is in red. I need to get there. I got to get there. So it's my firm vow, which I can retract, but it's my intention to get to red, to get to the 20s by early February, and then we'll be red for a while, then yellow, then I got to get to some goat rock stuff as well. Okay? So I'm trying to put pressure on myself. Keep it going. Yep. Our last 2 episodes, look at how many letters we've had in blue. N and O finishes out blue. We go to green. Is there more to green than Ohanapakash? Certainly there is. But I want to get to red. We're there. We got it. I'm reminding you that we've done break-off belt, rolled back magmas, near trench magmas. We're done with that, and we're now on Saturday going to these 2 locations, BADR. We're not quite there yet. We are wrapping up the Jeff Tepper trilogy, and this is what we were doing last time with the green M&M and talking about the different models. We leave all of that behind. All of that behind. Are you ready to start with the episode today? That was all preliminary, setting the tone, trying to get going with the second half of the alphabet, and so on. Very good. Photos. Lindsay Malone, using the proper colors now. She's got dark blue for the bald mountain. We decided that the bald mountain, depending on who you talk to, was either a break-off belt magma or a spreading ridge magma, a near trench magma. There's some Barlow Pass. That's a break-off belt, according to Jeff. And here's Squire Creek. We're going to get to that shortly. Gary Paul, thank you. Each of these folks, I don't know how much time it takes to put these photos together, get these labels on here. Very much appreciated. We're back in the North Cascades looking at a blue magma, the Railroad Creek Pluton. We've got purple for the Glacier Peak Volcanics. We've got a lot of gray in here, a lot of grello, a lot of crystalline core to look at. Thank you, Gary. This is a view west from Gray Peak. Another shot from Gary Paul, close to his home. View northwest from near Darrington, Washington. This is the Sauk River. Orange is the Chuckanut, equal to the Swauk locally. Haystack Helen Melange, it's gray. Barlow Pass Volcanics. The Barlow Pass is going to come back a little bit. And if we get to the top of Round Mountain and get a close-up shot, look at this gorgeous photograph from the Barlow Pass Volcanics. This is an outcrop close to the top of Round Mountain. A rhyolitic breccia, Gary wonders? And then back to Tepper's kind of roadmap for us. All of these units, according to Jeff Tepper, are firmly in the category of early days of the Cascades. Older than 40. Jeff, I probably picked blue because of this map, to be honest. I kind of forgot if that's true, but that's what we'll go with. 46 to 40. Goebel Volcanics, Northcraft Formation, Tukwila Formation, Mount Persis and Friends. Granite Falls is up here. Jeff Tepper, I'm not sure you're with us today live, but I am going to be doing a recorded Zoom with Jeff tomorrow morning. And Jeff, I really just want to go back and forth between these blue patches and Tamanous and learn some more detail from you. What is similar between all of these? What is different geochemically between all of these? Can we find a little bit more detail for next time? Thank you. Why are the early days of the Cascades visible? Why can we see these earliest days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc? Why is it visible at the surface? Like we're literally, and we're going to do this with some of the viewer photos coming in a bit, you can literally drive to the Gobel Volcanics or the North Craft or the Tukwila or the Mount Persis. Why isn't there 40 million years of lava sitting on top of the blue? Why isn't all that stuff buried? Why isn't all that stuff buried, in other words? Okay? The answer is clockwise rotation. And maybe you can see it immediately, but maybe you can't. So let's try something together. Let's draw together. You know the question? Why can we easily see the early days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, light blue? Why aren't they buried with all sorts of younger lavas that have erupted since 40 million years ago? So I want to try this. I didn't even practice this. Let's just try it. So early Cascades is light blue, right? So shouldn't this be like this? And then we get to the 30s, and shouldn't we have a well-behaved Cascade Volcanic Arc, right? Should we just have green on top of that stuff? We'll make it look a little bit more green, I guess. And then we get to the decade of the Roaring 20s, and shouldn't we do that and have 10 million more years of Cascade volcanic eruptions burying things? And then if we get into the teens, that's yellow and brown. Brown, 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 brown. Talk about rainbow. And then purple, the aughts. You following what I'm doing? Why isn't the light blue buried by all these other colors? Why is the light blue out here like this? And you're like, I know the answer. It's on the board. Clockwise rotation. But can you see it? Can you see why clockwise rotation is the answer to this question? Let's go to a video clip from 10 years ago. Block of marble, another metamorphic rock hanging out high in the Cascades. So many misplaced blocks of exotic bedrock up here that have stories of their own. And the past lies at a newly discovered boundary. Central Washington University operates a dense network of high-precision instruments that have been drilled into bedrock all across the Northwest. The Pacific Northwest Geodetic Array, PANGA, closely monitors tiny movements in the crust. Together, the GPS stations have revealed a new way to look at the Snoqualmie Pass region. So all those GPS stations of the PANGA network are across this map, and these are the results. There's a beautiful, graceful clockwise rotation of the crust in the Pacific Northwest. These yellow arrows, the longer the arrow, the faster the motion. Everybody's rotating around Pendleton, Oregon for some reason, and it's like the old game of crack the whip. You come around the outside, you're moving faster than the guys in the middle. But not everybody is rotating. This northeastern part of Washington is stable. It's part of the Canadian buttress that's not playing this rotation game. So right here at Snoqualmie Pass and the Hyack station, the GPS station from PANGA that's showing still a little bit of motion to the northeast, we're crunching the crust, rotating block into non-rotating block, tons of faults, tons of folds. It explains most of the topography in central Washington. Plus, the newly discovered clockwise rotation of the Northwest offers an elegant solution to an old Cascades volcanism question. Cone-shaped volcanoes in the Cascades, why do they exist? There's a subducting Juan de Fuca plate and magma is rising to the surface. On a map, the cones are in a beautiful line stretching through the Pacific Northwest. That's today, but 16 million years ago, and this has been known for a long time now, the line of cones was different. And the line switches to the east of the Cascades right here at Snoqualmie Pass. Nobody could explain this pattern until recently. Until when? Until we discovered this clockwise rotation of the Pacific Northwest. We're rotating the crust over magma coming up from the subduction zone. New instruments solve it. Okay, does that work for you? I was pleased to find that discovery in print about that time, more than 10 years ago. You have it. It's one of the papers that you have. It's a Ray Wells and Rob McCaffrey paper that is a short paper. It's one of my favorites. It takes this concept of kind of a Western Cascades and an Eastern Cascades and an older part of the Cascades and a newer part of the Cascades. And there used to be this talk of changing the angle of the subducting slab. But I like, personally, this elegant clockwise rotation story. If you want more ways to visualize the rotation, here's Jenda Johnson doing it in a slightly different way. She's got these spokes. This is an earlier version of what I showed you last week, I think. I just love the way she does that. And then this is one that I've used for years that Bob Butler at University of Portland put together with an animator, again, Jenda Johnson. And so audiences for more than 10 years now have just, you can feel it in the room when you share this with an audience, whether it's college students or a bunch of old people. They love this. They love this clockwise rotation idea. So there's another reason. There's another reason I want to involve clockwise rotation yet again today. Did you get the main point so far? We're rotating the blue out from the bottom of the, let me try it that way. So back to my sketch, like why are we seeing, in Jeff Tepper's diagram, why are we seeing the earliest days of the Cascades to the west and not underneath the pile? Why is the blue out here and not at the bottom of the rainbow? And what we're trying to say is that there has been just enough clockwise rotation to take that light blue and get it out from underneath the rest. And then you might go, well, why isn't it a whole rainbow then? Why wouldn't we have, can I do it? Why wouldn't we have blue and then green and then red? Why wouldn't we have all the colors of the rainbow laid out? I don't know the answer to that. Realizing that right now, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think clockwise rotation has slowed. Okay, I can't get hung up there. That's an interesting question, I think. All right, so the clockwise rotation continues to pop up in this series, surprisingly. And you remember one of the reasons we were doing it before is to take these old volcanic centers that many people view as being the result of being on top of the Yellowstone mantle plume and rotating them away from their original pathway. There's a specific reason right now for us to think about that yet again. Go. Stop. Darrell Gussey, retired U.S. Forest Service geologist who was a close collaborator with Paul Hammond, Portland State University. And again, I mentioned this last time, Paul Hammond has passed away just recently in his mid-90s. And so we are continuing to reflect on Paul Hammond's career, but Darrell has been catching up. Darrell Gussey has been catching up with the programs live and in replay, and Darrell passed along the full poster that Paul Hammond and Darrell presented at the GSA meeting in 2014, maybe the last presentation that Paul Hammond gave. I'm not quite sure. So this is from that poster. It's at the website for you to inspect more carefully. But this is another way to show what we got into a little bit last time. Paul Hammond says, here are the original rocks on the projected track of the Yellowstone hotspot, and here's how much rotation or how much movement there has been since those rocks were created. 14 millimeters a year over the course of 47.36 million years. You're like, I don't remember that from last time. Well, do you remember this? I love this one. And this is right from the poster, the 2014 poster by Hammond, where he has the right shading on the arrows now. This is where North America overtops the Yellowstone mantle plume 42 million years ago, and the rocks that were originally here are now up here in southwestern Washington. So I'm slowing down because I thought maybe I was going to get into the Grays River volcanics or the Kalama River or the Tillamook or the Waverly Heights, these 4 units here. But I really like the idea that these 4 units, highlighted so beautifully and graphically by Paul Hammond 10 years ago, is saying that this is not a Cascade story. This is not a near trench magma story necessarily. These are Yellowstone mantle plume rocks that have been moved into Washington and extreme northwestern Oregon. I love that. And so basically I'm saying we're going to remove a few rocks that I thought we might study this winter because I don't see them fitting into our early days of the Cascades. Age-wise, they're in the neighborhood of that, maybe even a little bit younger than light blue. No, that's wrong. They're 50. So we're not going into the Grays Rivers or these others. And I think Jeff Tepper and others have made the case that there was a slab window for some of these guys. And we're right back to the green M&M and was the spreading ridge south or north. We're not going there again. I'm not falling for it again, boys. Good. All right. I don't know what I said in the last episode. Maybe I literally said, hey, can somebody go out and drive around and look at some of these rocks? I don't think I said that, but maybe I must have said something that sounded like that to some of you. I'm not complaining because a number of viewers since the last episode, since last Saturday, jumped in their rig and started going visiting some of these rocks and taking pictures and emailing them to Ned Zinger, and I want to share some of them. So we have a brand new Gary on our hands. We have a third Gary. Alberta Gary, not today. Backcountry Gary, nope. This is Olympia Gary. Thank you, Olympia Gary, Gary Ritchie. And Gary said, yeah, I jumped in my truck and I went down to the Grays River Volcanics, thinking that they might be part of our series. And he said the first 5 photos I took about 3 to 5 miles north of Castle Rock along what appeared to be Route 411, parallels the Cowlitz River, heavily forested. And appreciate it, Olympia Gary, for these handsome photos of some of these volcanic rocks of the Grays River. But I just mentioned that because of clockwise rotation, because of some of the detailed chemistry, these are not part of our series this winter. More coming from Olympia Gary. But I've been looking for a place to put this in, and I think now's the place. It's still a weird place to put it in, but viewer David emailed me before Christmas when I was scrambling to keep track of my inbox and everything else. So I finally got to your email, David. Thank you. And David somehow found a very impressive map. Many of you know this name. Irwin Reyes, in 1942, was a professor, maybe of geography, I'm not sure, at Harvard. And he made a hand-drawn map that continues to be famous. But David found it in a high-resolution form and emailed it to me, and I put it on the frickin' website. I put it on the website, and I had no idea that famous Reyes map was connected to a little brief paper called the Olympic Wallowa Lineament, where in the text, Reyes is saying when the map was completely finished in ink in the early 1940s, I looked at it sideways on the map. I was looking at the map sideways, and I noticed a peculiar line stretching from Cape Flattery at the entrance of San Juan de Fuca Strait to the Wallowa Mountains. This line must be obvious to anyone looking at the map from the northwesterly corner towards the center. Apparently, we may have here one of the major structural lines or lineaments. And just when I was showing that clip from the I-90 video, somebody said, is that the owl? So the owl, the Olympic Wallowa Lineament, we're coming right through this campus. has been a frustration for me. It continues to be a frustration. What is the significance of this line? And you're like, I've never heard of this line. Well, you've got this map now that you can zoom into incredibly tightly and still have high resolution quality. I've always seen this map in kind of a crappy, fuzzy thing. Maybe you too. So David has sent us this incredibly large file. So here's the line. This is Strait of Juan de Fuca. This is the Vancouver Island, northwestern Washington boundary. And then these are Ray's arrows. And then here's the Wallowas down by this is down by Twin Falls, Idaho. And let me zoom in. Ed, what was his name? The Harvard professor, here's Ellensburg, is saying, I'm just noticing after making this hand-drawn map that there's this very strange line. And there's a snobbiness among geologists typically like, yeah, I know, there's kind of a line, but it's not that easy. There's no simple explanation for it. I don't know. There probably should be an explanation for it. But we keep pushing in. Look at this detail. Look at this detail. I've never had this opportunity. Ellensburg, Harborview Medical Center, Mount Rainier, and so on. So thank you, David. I'll take you all to the website right now, I think, and show you the papers I have for you today. The talk that Jeff Tepper gave in Ellensburg in November, his slides are here. Erin, we're going to get to Erin Donaghy soon, her sedimentary units on the Inlet Peninsula. This is the poster that got it all started for me in 2019 from Jeff Tepper. There's the poster of Paul Hammond that has more than these two maps that we just looked at. There's a bunch of detail if this appeals to you. I have no idea if anybody was real excited. I was excited, and I was at that meeting in Vancouver, BC. I didn't realize Paul was there, I guess. But here, Olympic Wallowa paper by Ray's. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this thing's a monster file. And it's because of this monster. Look at this thing. What if I just push in like now? Am I going to choke the internet? I've never seen this map in such clarity. And I'm just starting to wonder how I can use this more in my teaching. But if you love maps and you love kind of an intersection between art and science, there is one of the most famous intersections of art and science, if you ask me. All right, back to the program. I think we're about to head to something different. Yeah, another kind of thought. So we're transitioning to something called stratigraphy. And I think many of you, but maybe not all of you, know what that word means. If you are studying the stratigraphy of an area geologically, that means that you are investigating the layers in the cake. German chocolate cake, that's the Columbia River basalt group, and you're looking for an exposure of all of those layers, the strata. And collectively, you're working your way from the bottom to the top, maybe, and you're going layer by layer, and you're noticing differences in color and texture and fossils and whatever. Okay? That's stratigraphy. Now, today marks the beginning of what I think is a rather steady march through the stratigraphy of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. And my question is there a Grand Canyon? Is there some sort of canyon where we could go where we can actually see all of the stratigraphy, like in Arizona? So suddenly we are not in the Cascades, right? Correct. Okay. But you know that if you're a geologist and you start at the Colorado River in the bottom of the Grand Canyon and you work your way from the river all the way up to the South Rim, let's say, this is taken on the North Rim. If you go up to the South Rim, you're working your way up through the stratigraphy, And you're like, okay, well, here's a layer that formed in a warm, shallow sea, and the next one formed in a desert, and the next one formed with a river system, and the next one, the warm, shallow sea was back. So you're telling stories, basically. You're telling stories from the layers. And classically, Geology 101, you've got a whole story to tell. And each page in the book has a different story. Okay, we get it. We get it. But this is the Cascades. Is there a Grand Canyon of the Cascades where we can go and start with blue at the bottom, and then green, and then red, and then yellow-brown, and then purple? That'd be nice. Is there a Grand Canyon of the Cascades in the Pacific Northwest? And the answer is, yeah, there is. There is. There is a huge canyon that cuts right through the Cascades. It's not the Grand Canyon, but it's a big old canyon where the Columbia River, not the Colorado River, is doing the digging for us. So if you want to go back to our rainbow, we do have a rather sizable river canyon cutting right through the middle. I mean, we have a Grand Canyon. So why couldn't we go to the Grand Canyon of the Cascades and start at the bottom and work our way to the top? If we want to tell all these stories by color, I think most of you know the answer. But just in case you don't, here's the answer why we cannot go here. Even though it's an enormous canyon digging deeply into the heart of the Cascades. The answer is, first of all, the layers are tipped. They're not horizontal. You're like, well, that's okay. That's different than the Grand Canyon. All right, those are nice and flat, and we can work our way up. But if they're tipped a little bit, that's okay. I'm willing to work with that. That's you talking. I can deal with some tipped layers. Get some syncline wine, Rowena Dell. But it's worse than that. Most of the layers in the Columbia River Gorge are Columbia River basalt lavas. There's a little bit of green, Ohanapakash, and I don't know if Eagle Creek is green or red, but there's a little bit down there. But most of the walls of our Grand Canyon are Columbia River basalt lava because that Grand Canyon was a canyon during the time of the flood basalts, and the flood basalts are pouring through the Cascades and concealing the layers that we would want to see if we really want to tell the story. So one of the points I'm trying to build today is that we have to be clever. We have to be clever for the rest of the alphabet if we want to learn the stratigraphy in the Cascade Volcanic Arc. We have to be clever by grouping dozens of names into one or two names. And we have to be careful with our locations because we're not going to have one Grand Canyon to use. We can do it. We can march through time. We can march through the colors, courtesy of Backcountry Gary and Backcountry Lindsay and many of the rest of you. But we can't go to one beautiful canyon. It'd be nice, but we cannot do it. So we'll come back to this, but we need to realize that the Columbia River Gorge, a huge hole, is not really the place to do our stratigraphy like we're hoping to do here. All right. So we're transitioning to Aaron Donaghy. So I thought up until a couple days ago, we would just go right to the igneous rocks of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, all the magmas being generated, and whether those magmas cooled underground into plutonic rocks or whether they erupted onto the surface in the form of volcanic rocks, doesn't matter. Light blue, we're going to look at a bunch of igneous rocks, and that's coming on Saturday. But the more I started to think on Tuesday morning, I'm like, should I involve sedimentary rock somehow in this story? And the more I thought about it, it's like, yeah, I should. There's a bunch of reasons to include the sedimentary formations as well as the igneous formations in the Cascade Volcanic Arc. And you're like, I don't see why you would do that. And that's, I guess we'll let Aaron help us see why we can do that. But I'll give you a clue. There's a lot of interfingering between lava flows and sediments. And so as we fight through formation names and try to come up with some narratives through the history of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, we're not just working with stacks of lavas. We're not just working with plutons, with magma chambers that are frozen underground. We're dealing with a bunch of sedimentary material. You remember early in the alphabet, we had the Western Melange Belt, we had the Grello, and we had the parade of plutons coming up through the Grello. We have to include sedimentary units that are the host before the invasion of the magmas from below, or oftentimes there's sediments being deposited at the same time that we have sometimes rather dramatic volcanic events. God, I'm feeling good today. So we transition to Aaron Donaghy, but I guess I want to show you some of my attempts before I show you the first Aaron clip of my attempts to try to get us into this world of organizing all these formation names. Ready, go. So I wanted to do something like this. If you remember, this is from 6 years ago, where I was just trying to keep track of names, and this is not our color scheme currently, but I was, we worked our way, and where are we in the series? We're kind of in here somewhere. And Skamania, I don't know what the hell that, I guess that's Oregon, right? So we're kind of in here, but I was wanting to make something like this using the sedimentary and volcanic units. So there's been different attempts. Might as well show you kind of where we are. This was my attempt earlier in the alphabet, and by God, we got to most of this. I don't know if you can read this, but remember, between 51 and 46, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know much about. We got to most of it, I have to say. Didn't get to the Rosalind, didn't get to the oh so much. Got to almost everything else. So we're now to the light blue. And this was my rougher version that I was using when I talked to Aaron Donaghy, and I just spruced this up about 45 minutes ago. So we're starting to build this, and this is what I'm starting to see. We're here today. The Puget group, including these guys. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know the Tukwila Formation was part of a larger group called the Puget group. Doi. The sandstone of Summit Creek. Haley Finch. Finch. Haley Finch. You sampled some sandstone of Summit Creek, did you not? You're going to be using it in your Goat Rocks project. I think the tentative age assignment for the sandstone of Summit Creek is equivalent to the Rosalind Formation in the upper Kittitas County. Haley, that's not far from Ellensburg. And all these Puget group rocks that we're about to visit, courtesy of our viewers. But the basalt of Summit Creek is older, apparently. That's a surprise. I thought maybe these two guys were equivalent to the SWAC, but I'm now realizing the basalt of Summit Creek is correlative with the Teanaway bimodal. There's bimodal of, it's not just basalt, there's rhyolites at Summit Creek as well. And the chumstick and the lyre, which we're about to talk about with Aaron Donaghy, are all in this dark blue time. So to me, this is progress. And we'll eventually get here next weekend, supposedly. I think it's time to talk to Aaron Donaghy. And I have to say it. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that she wants to come back to Washington to do new research with her graduate students that she is now supervising at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And one of the projects she wants to do is this stuff right here. The Tukwila. and the rest of the Puget group. Love it. Aaron, we need you.
As part of the Puget group, but I'm not necessarily sure if you would include the Macintosh and the Skookumchuck and the Northcraft into.
Sorry, I'll start that again. I'm off the screen here. Try again. Sorry.
As part of the Puget group, but I'm not necessarily sure if you would include the Macintosh and the Skookumchuck and the Northcraft into the Puget, because they're kind of in the Olympia area and then working your way westward from there.
Oh,
They're age
okay.
equivalent to the
Yeah.
Puget group, that they've been inferred to be age equivalent, but they have slightly different depositional environments and probably formed at different kind of paleogeographic locations on the continental margin.
Okay.
But um, but
Cool.
they're geographically in different areas, and I'm not sure they're necessarily included with the Puget group, but the Tuckwell and the Renton, and then I think the Blakely Formation is also included in the Puget group. Um,
Okay. All right. Okay.
there's two different
So
Blakely ones, and it's been a while since I've looked at the papers. So
yeah.
one is definitely younger, but it's like Blakely Harbor or something. And then there's another one that's actually, I think, included in the Puget group. So it can get a little confusing. And there hasn't been any high precision chronostratigraphy or a lot of recent age dating done on those units. It's all been kind of previously done on biostratigraphy. So
That's the point. That's why you're coming back up.
that's
Like,
why I would love
like,
to go back
yes.
out and start working on those rocks.
And I'll say it for you. If you're not going to say it, you know that you will come up with some new narratives. You know you'll find some new dates, and you'll know you'll be able to have more confidence in doing what I'm trying to do right now, which I think it's safe to say without offending anybody. Uh, it's kind of a mess in names and narratives and everything else. Okay, so we've established that, and okay, that is exciting. And I know she's about to present. She's about to write a proposal for the National Science Foundation to do that work. But she's got detail with the Lyre Formation out on the Olympic Peninsula. She's got that's her PhD. She's got detail from the Chumstick Basin in eastern Washington. That's her master's degree. So who better to connect the dots between those two locations with these sedimentary units in the foothills of the Cascades, in the greater Seattle area, even up in the Cascades, the sandstone of Summit Creek, and to get some high precision dates that she will certainly get and make some correlations. Very, very fun. What did I want to show you here? Yeah, so that's where we are. Two more clips from Aaron coming in a bit. We're about to head to some of these places. To set up the next couple of clips, we had this concept, courtesy of Ken Clark, for the SWAC time, for the orange time, that we don't have mountains. But I was starting to wonder if we had something similar even after the beginning of the Cascades. You're like, that's a dumb thought. Aren't we today starting the Cascade Volcanic Arc? Yes, we are. But so many of the sedimentary units that are from light blue time are being deposited in the neighborhood of sea level. Even into green time, even into the Ohanapikosh, we're going to have submarine volcanic activity. So one of our themes this winter is, when are we going to uplift and make an actual recognizable Cascade mountain range with towering cones like we have today? It might be a while before we have that. That's another reason to look at the sedimentary units. Do the sedimentary units themselves tell us about a former scene? And there have been attempts before Aaron to try to connect eastern Washington with western Washington. So to be honest, I forget what the next couple video clips are, but it's tied to those two concepts I just threw out there. So let's go back to Aaron. Yeah, we'll eventually get here, but not yet. Sorry, I'm out of order. So, okay, I remember now why I put that last slide in. So taking a break from Aaron Donaghy, We're back to Olympia Gary, who jumped in his pickup and went down to the Goebel, went to the Northcraft, and so on. Thank you, Gary. Olympia Gary. So Gary, I don't know, Sunday maybe, Gary, drove down to the Portland area, went to a quarry just west of the tiny town of Goebel, after which the formation is named. You can't get into the quarry as it's being heavily used and gated, so I parked by the road and walked in through the woods and got a couple of shots. Some large, very red quarry rocks along the edge of the parking lot. The rock was brecciated and kind of rotten. Thank you for your hustle, Olympia Gary, and we might be able to use these locations a bit more if I can get some juicy detail from Jeff Tepper, who has supervised undergraduate work on each of these units, including the Goebel. I don't know what to do with the Goebel so far, except enjoy your photographs. Early days of the Cascades. Yeah, they're netted up just like the ugly basalt of Summit Creek. Best place to see the Goebel across the Columbia, just north and south of the town of Kalama. Pocket knife. Most of the Goebel cliffs along I-5 have been covered with a chain link fence to keep them from falling onto the road. Plenty of Goebel hustle from Olympia Gary. That's not enough. Gary, I think in the same day, headed north to the Northcraft Formation. By the time I got back to the tiny town of Vail, you can see the elements of the Northcraft. It was dark. I didn't get any photos. A couple of years ago, I sent you photos, Nick, of a lahar along the Deschutes, which are part of the Northcraft Formation. The photo of Northcraft Mountain near the town of Vail was taken by a fellow named Robert Jenner, whom I don't know. The mountain is occupied by Weyerhaeuser Tree Farm. You can see various age classes of Douglas fir stands around the hillside. So these are photos from a lahar within the Northcraft, also from Olympia Gary, that he sent a few years ago. Look at that. Beautiful volcanic lahar within the Northcraft. Details coming on Saturday, I hope, about the Goebel, the Northcraft, and other early days magmas. But we're back to this concept, which I jumped the gun on. Sorry about that. We're back to this concept of how much connection there was with paleo rivers between eastern and western Washington, even after we start the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Back to Aaron Donaghy, UNLV geology professor. Is there any sedimentary unit that can get us connecting eastern western Washington and say everybody's back down to sea level?
I'm not sure about that, but as far as for when I started to think maybe the little sedimentary basins, so the trench slope basins on the northern Olympic Peninsula, they were isolated from what I would probably say was happening with the Puget group more inland. So they're all part of the Four Arc region, but the northern Olympic Peninsula basins, they're forming on top of essentially our subduction complex and our accretionary prism. So there are these little trench slope basins, and then through time, and I say that's based on the detrital zircon record, but also the compositional, so the sandstone petrography data in the units on the northern Olympic Peninsula. We see right at the Eocene-Oligocene boundary, we go from this unit called the Hoco River Formation to the Macaw Formation. And the Macaw Formation is the first time we see this influx of feldspathic, more quartz-rich detritus. And we get a change in the detrital zircon signatures. And it's at that time then that we think maybe we have enough subsidence that we have this broad integrated Four Arc basin. So these would then be correlating to Oligocene sedimentary basins that are exposed on the southern tip of Vancouver Island and along the west coast of offshore Vancouver Island. But then also maybe this is when we're starting to be more connected to at least the other Four Arc basin deposits. So things like the Puget group in the Blakely Formation and Renton and all those other units that are a little more east in Washington. But, as far as, did that connect then again? Did we have paleo rivers coming from Chumstick area?
Yes.
Like, we have possibly seen influx of sediments from the Cascade crystalline core. It's a little harder to say because I think the detrital zircon signatures that we can get, they can be sourced from other areas, at least on the Olympic Peninsula, which you're essentially at the trench at that point. So
Right.
when sediments from the crystalline core making it all the way to the trench, we think possibly then maybe around the Oligocene based on the signatures in the Macaw Formation. But it is possible to get some of those signatures from other more proximal sources in the region. But that's the first time we start to see some kick up with some different DZ age signatures that maybe things were making it all the way out.
Maybe, and I remember I'm grinning because I remember I was really into that visual a couple of years ago when we were into your work in the Chumstick, and you had that river, and you had that river heading to the. Okay, Erin was so good, so on point, it's so effortless with her. She's got everything ready to go. It's a young mind. But she was also kind to me because I was confused about something. And I want to clear up my confusion, which I may have done again in this episode. I'm not quite sure. I kept thinking, and maybe continue to think, that the Chumstick, which is really, I think of Erin Donaghy and no one else for the detail within the Chumstick Formation, over by Wenatchee, between Wenatchee and Leavenworth. And she has all these airfall tufts within the Chumstick, so she knows exactly where she is in time. That stuff's dark blue. That stuff is older than 46. That is too old for today's episode. And even some of these sediments that are on Mike Eddy's diagram from the Barlow Pass volcanics are too old. I keep trying to lump these guys into today's episode. They're too old, man. According to these dates from Mike Eddy in particular, but now Erin Donaghy, too old. But I think everybody still is confused about the Roslyn Formation with a bunch of coal seams within it in the upper Kittitas County, close to Cle Elum. Northern Exposure, the old TV show, the Roslyn, the Brick, all of that. And there's the Dead Horse Canyon member of the Chumstick as well, but it's those units that we're trying to then take through the mountains and get over here to the Cowlitz or the Lincoln Creek or the whatever. Again, I'm confused on how this all works together, but there have been attempts before Erin, and I have hopes that there will be new attempts with the detail that Erin will be able to put together. I mean, I don't know if I'm a pack rat necessarily like my dad was, who was just, hoarding everything in sight, an old farmer. But I do have some old documents that I hang on just in case I can use them, including scraps of papers from Robert D. Bentley, who was a longtime geology professor here at Central. And when I showed up, he was 30 years older than I was, and he mentored me in many ways. So here's Bob Bentley in the early 90s trying to go from the Rockies to the Pacific, including looking at the Cascades. And again, this is 35 years old, but Bentley's just trying to do kind of in more than that, almost 40 years old. These are just teaching sketches that he would make and just Xerox like crazy. But we're right in here now. The non-marine rocks, I guess we're too young. We're in this swath where he is trying to connect between stuff that we know in Western Washington with Eastern Washington. I'm fine with that. I don't need to go to the Rockies necessarily. But my point is there have been plenty of attempts. I don't know who did this, but they're taking the Summit Creek Basalt, Tukwila, Northcraft, Carbonado, Raging River, McIntosh, Skookumchuck, Spiketon, Rosalind, Natchez. It's all like Eocene. But this is just begging. This is begging for Erin Donaghy. Hey, you work for National Science Foundation? You do? You're in a cubicle in Washington, D.C. right now? Did you just get that grant proposal from Erin Donaghy, UNLV, about this projected work? Did she include a clip, a link to this video, and you watched it? Thank you for watching it. Why wouldn't you fully support this young lady in this work? It would be so fun to see new stories come out of these light blue units. I'm now realizing Lincoln Creek, accordingly to everybody, I guess, is in southwestern Washington. You flip-flop those, please. It's green. All right. One more from Erin. We need to get there before we go anywhere else.
But they're mostly non-marine because we have the coal deposition there. But as you work your way, at least in the south, there's this really beautiful transgression of facies in the different units. So if you're going from maybe the Olympia area and working your way out towards like Gray's Harbor, you go from this transition from non-marine to kind of near shore, shallow marine, deep marine. And so from there, people have reconstructed where was that shoreline or where was sea level, essentially, along the margin. But up in the north, it's a little more difficult. We don't have like that continuous exposure of units like we do kind of working our way from the maybe central Washington to western Washington south of the essentially Olympic National Park.
Yeah.
As in Seattle and Olympia.
But from my point of view, for the next couple of episodes, if we're in the early days of the Cascades, 46 to 40 million years ago, there's no evidence from anybody that there's a major mountain range immediately. Like we're still flirting with sea level, whether it's above or below, if we're swampy, if we're brackish, if we're non-marine, if we're marine, if we're submarine fans, it's still all pretty low level stuff, elevation-wise. Is that correct generally?
Yeah, we know at least we know when we collided Celestia, we created topography with a Calvichan, a fold and thrust belt, and then we inverted.
Oh, right.
We had reversal of paleo current in the Squawk Basin, and then.
Yeah. Aaron caught me there, thankfully. I forgot about our temporary high after Celestia accreted. And we had the rivers change their direction. Remember that? So there was a temporary highland, probably not as big as the Olympic Peninsula today, but a temporary high at that backstop where Celestia collided with the Western Melange Belt. But I'm not sure we ever started building on top of that highland. I think it was a temporary high, and by the time we get to light blue, I think we might have these trans-cascade rivers, like the Chumstick River that Aaron had. Okay, those were 3 high-quality video clips from Aaron Donaghy. The full conversation is on my website. But just go back. No, I'm not going to go back. I want to go to Docu one more time, and there's all sorts of papers if you look for them, and the point is they're not using current dating methods. And this is in the 80s. Who is this? This is Joe Vance, University of Washington, Jeff Clayton, master's student at UW, Jim Mattinson, who we'll talk about, father of Chris Mattinson, who teaches here, and Charles Nazer. They're working with these units in the Mount Rainier area. Here's a heads up. Starting next week, we're going to be using Mount Rainier National Park as a laboratory, a natural laboratory, a case study location. And I'm going to use a bunch of those videos that I filmed this summer. I just kept going back up to Rainier in August and September. You maybe saw all of those. Paradise Road, Sunrise Road, etc. We're going to finally get to those units and use them in such a beautiful place. Very much looking forward to that. But here these guys are trying to take some of these exposures around Rainier. There's our basalt of Summit Creek, baby. There's our sandstone of Summit Creek, younger. And I don't know anything about the Spencer Creek Tuff and Lookout Creek sandstone and so on. But these kinds of correlations, that's my point. These regional correlations have been a hobby for many in the last 50, even 100 years. But nobody had the tools that Mike Eddy, Jeff Tepper, Aaron Donaghy, and others have now. And the details make those correlations sing in a way they really haven't been made before. So the new way to correlate is using these high precision dates in tuffs out on the Olympic Peninsula and trying to reconstruct, before we formed the Olympic Peninsula, some of these units. There's the Western Melange Belt. So this is the Seattle area. And here's this continuation of the Lyre Formation. And there's some volcanic tuff within that and the Aldwell down below. This is an Erin Donaghy photograph, not officially published yet, but she shared with us. Same idea. We've got some uplands now after the accretion of Silesia. This is all Silesia here. Here's the downgoing slab. We're about to start the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Is this Kula? Is this Farallon? Inquiring minds want to know. But there's some rare andesites here and there. Puget Group makes its appearance for the first time. That's how we'll finish today's episode, by looking carefully at the Puget Group. Puget Group with some andesites in the middle of the Puget Group. Hoko River. Blue Mountain Unit. All these things are fragments from past years that we've been doing things. Hey, Aaron's in the live chat. Great to see you here, Aaron. Thank you. Mike Eddy, before Aaron even started working with Mike Eddy, trying to correlate the Roslyn Formation with the Puget Group and then coming on out. It's tempting to do this. Tempting to do this. And you're like, I thought we were talking about the early days of the Cascades. We are. I'm trying to get a visual for the early days of the Cascades. Everybody is saying it's not a big, dominant mountain range with towering stratocones. Nobody's saying that. Everybody agrees it's not that. So I think I'm going to be obsessed with this sea level story until talked out of it, because I like that idea. And here at Puget Group Roslyn time, perhaps we have everything planed off again, more or less. Finally, next time we go to Tamanoas Rock and Granite Falls, at least. But the rest of today is going to the Puget Group. And one of the members, or one of the formations within the Puget Group, is the Tukwila Formation. So how do I do this? Do I show you the old document first, or do I'll show you the old document first. So again, pack wrap time. Somebody gave this to me, I think, at least 20 years ago. I don't know if it exists anywhere online, but I hung on to it. This is Bedrock and Boot Soles, an introduction to the geology of the Issaquah Alps by Marvin Pistrang. I don't know if you're still with us, Marvin, but you did a nice job. I assume this was just typed out, literally typed out, for people who are wanting to find new ways to appreciate the Issaquah Alps. This is a $2 document in 1981. Issaquah Alps Trail Club. So there's some text more along the lines of what I said in kind of a snarky tone at the beginning. I didn't mean it that way, but it's kind of descriptive, and here's what the rocks are, and these different Tiger Mountain and so on. But look at this. Tiger Mountain and Raging River, I colored it orange. Tukwila, I colored it light blue. Renton, I colored it green. I guess that's green. And Blakely, I colored it red. So they've got some, again, these are dates from more than 40 years ago. But this is where we're finishing today's episode. You live in the greater Seattle area? Do you fly in and out of SeaTac Airport? How many times have you driven, like I have, like we have, Interstate 90? Here's the town of Snoqualmie and Snoqualmie Falls. Here's Preston. Here's the town of Issaquah, Lake Sammamish. You've got your bearings now, Mercer Island. So this is Interstate 90. Here's 405, where the Seahawks have their practice facility. Here's Renton, on the way to SeaTac Airport. Here's State Route 18. Jordan Carey and I drove over to Olympia on Monday. We took 18 in the dark. Always construction on 18. So here's Rattlesnake Mountain. If If you know that Rattlesnake area with those ledges, here's Tiger Mountain. And my point is, we're finishing with some of the light blue early days of the Cascades, some of them lavas, some of them sedimentary rocks, and some other things that may or may not be worth our attention in the next few years. But I don't know, Aaron, are you going to be doing some work even right in here in the Issaquah Alps? You going to write that into your proposal? So if you're a big fan of Erin Donaghy like I am, and you associate her with the Chumpstick Basin over by Wenatchee and the Lyre and the Aldwell and the Blue Mountain Unit over on the Olympic Peninsula, you might have Erin Donaghy in your own backyard if you live in Western Washington near some of these places of civilization. We finish with more roadside photos from viewers, and we go to this blotch of earliest Cascade volcanics, the Issaquah Alps and other locations. Let's go. Tom Foster with an artsy shot showing the location of the Issaquah Alps. We're kind of looking southeast. Mount Rainier to the south. Ellensburg's over here on the horizon. Issaquah Alps, really sexy name. Tom from Maple Valley comes through yet again. Picks light blue for us. Thank you, Tom. 46-40. Here's a similar looking map to what we were just looking at in the Bedrock and Boot Soles map from Marvin in 1981. Another very helpful map from Tom. And he's going to take us to an outcrop at 990. Tom from Maple Valley is going to take us some looks at the Tukwila at Highway 18 near Tiger Mountain. He's going to take us to some outcrops right there north of SeaTac by the Boeing Field and the Museum of Flight. And again, this is recently. This is since the last episode. Tom went out to take some photos. And he'll admit they're not sexy looking rocks necessarily, but we can pull out some stories ultimately from this Tukwila Formation. Part of the Puget group. You're like, tell us about all these dates. Tell us about all these units. Check back with us in 6 years after Erin and her students have worked this all out. There's sandstones. There's eruptive centers. I emailed Jeff Tepper, have you worked on this Tukwila? He's like, nope. Plenty of other places to work, but just haven't gotten started on the Tukwila yet. I might it someday. Let's go over to the Duwamish Hill and Airport South site. I mean, he's in civilization now. There must be deafening roar of traffic. Airport Way. I love these photos, Tom. Thank you for taking the time. It helps us. I don't know if we're going to film a Nick on the Rocks episode necessarily next to the off-ramp, but it's fun to see these. McDonald's garbage next to the freeway. I mean, I find myself at some odd spots when I'm out doing a video or something and I'm on the shoulder and there's a truck going by and they're honking and you never know if they're like mad at you or they're like recognize you and saying hi. You can't tell. So it's extra fun for me to visualize some of these cats out here among the garbage next to the road for us. Thank you. For us. Duwamish Hill site has some Native American history. Tom out with his dog. We got a paw for scale. Thank you, Tom. Okay, we go here next. Do I have a teaser for you? A Gary Paul photo. Gary's been out to Tamanous Rock with a nice artsy shot looking up at this incredible chimney. But it's one of two key spots that we will be going for the early days of the magmas of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. time for some live Q&A. Thank you so much for all who contributed to this episode. And there's more coming with light blue in the early days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, coming less than 48 hours from now, Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Uppercase, please, for your questions. I don't know if we still have Erin Donaghy with us. If we do, she can answer some questions as well. I will try my best. And this also your questions might steer what I try to do for part 2 coming on Saturday morning. Extra loud out in the hallway. I don't know what's going on out there. Patrick, could the owl be considered as the surface exposure of the boundary between the clockwise rotating block and the Canadian buttress? It's a possibility, Patrick, and that's certainly the impression that I seem to give in that old I-90 Rocks video. There's that boundary between the rotating block and the non-rotating block is kind of in the neighborhood of the owl. If we talk about the owl just a little bit more, I think the general argument has been, is there a strike? Should I do this? Hang on. Let me go back. As long as we've known about that line, I don't know how many papers exist about it. This is the line we're talking about. Why is there such an obvious line on a beautiful map? And I think one way to summarize the discussion among geologists is this thing a strike-slip fault or not? Like, has there been... We know there are other northwest trending strike-slip faults. The Leavenworth Fault, the Eniot Fault, the Ross Lake Fault Zone, they're all parallel to this thing. Is this yet another strike-slip fault? And you'd like, yeah, it probably is. It's probably like the biggest one. And yet, Steve Rydell comes to mind, longtime floods basalt and structural geology person from the Tri-Cities. And Steve Rydell says, look, it's impossible to have the owl, the Olympic Wallowa line, be a strike-slip fault because I have some Columbia River basalt feeder dikes that are perpendicular to that thing, and they have not been broken. They have not been offset. So if you want this thing to be a strike-slip fault, I guess fine, but it can't have any strike-slip motion on it younger than 17 million years ago because I've got these feeder dikes right across this thing, and they haven't been broken. And then you're like, oh, okay, I guess that works. But then you think, well, why would a strike-slip fault that's been dead for 17 million years be visible on a map like this? It must be a young fault. And so I've said it before, I'll say it again right now. Even though this tantalizing line, which also appears to be at the northern edge of Siletsia's accretion, by the way, right? This is also the northern edge of where we had Siletsia accrete. And the southern edge of Siletsia accreting down in southern Oregon is some other kind of lineament, I think, but not as obvious as the owl. Even though this tantalizing line, known since 1942, comes right through my backyard, literally, I have not known what to do with it. I would love, before I'm done teaching, whenever that is, to have something meaningful to say about the owl. But I don't think anybody's come up with an approach that can make it work and convincing. Besides that 1942 paper, I honestly don't know. It's not worth a detour in our series, I'm almost sure. Okay. Lottie, could the owl be related to a tear in Siletsia along the Seattle Fault? Sure, why not? We had Megan Anderson had our tear. Okay, I can see where this is going. We're all going to be talking about this. I thought the tear was more east-west, Lottie. But there was a north of Seattle versus south of Seattle difference. You can see how tempting it is. You can see how tempting it is. I'm sure that's what half of you want to talk about right now. But how do you find a scientific approach to confirm or deny some ideas? Maybe a mistake to get into this. I don't know. It's a total distraction, but I just wanted to share that map so badly. Look at this thing. Look at that. I'm getting lost in it right now. Come on, man. Come on. Armchair geologist. So we have clockwise rotation and westward continental drift. Yes, the North American plate is drifting a few inches a year to the southwest, technically over the Yellowstone mantle plume. And within that North American plate motion, we have this leading edge of the North American plate, at least in the Pacific Northwest, rotating clockwise. Both can happen in concert with each other. What caused the Pendleton to be the pivot point? Clockwise rotation, western edge of Oregon. The general answer to what's causing the clockwise rotation is the two current ocean plates we have offshore, the Pacific plate going northwest and the Juan de Fuca plate going northeast. The combination of those two guys are driving the Pacific Northwest clockwise rotation, which some people can find that clockwise rotation going inboard as far as Montana. Aaron's still with us. That's nice of you, Aaron. Thank you. You know, Aaron, you're getting settled in a new place. Maybe it's comforting to be with us old friends. I remember always getting really lonely when I would go to a new place. I didn't know anybody. I would like watch TV shows that at least were my friends. Oh, this is pathetic. Stop. Kevin, is it because the southeast terminus of the owl is at the Pendleton? Looks okay. You guys are all locked in now. Jim, does it seem the early Cascade Arc volcanism is relatively weaker, low volume than subsequent arc evolution? Interesting questions. I can ask Jeff that tomorrow. Jeff Tepper. Of course, we have scraps of things left after 40 million years of erosion and uplift. So it's probably a pretty difficult thing to do to approximate volume of deposits. But with that said, I guess I'm anticipating, I'm going to stop that. I was going to say, by the time we get to red, I'm imagining way more lavas and volume in magmas and everything than the 30s. But I stopped myself halfway mid through that thought because one of the shocks from the green time is the thickness of the Ohanapakash, which I was discovering over and over in those Rainier videos. So maybe that's where you're coming from, Jim. Maybe you saw those videos and saw we had whatever it was, 15,000 vertical feet of Ohanapakash, and maybe we do have just scraps of stuff from light blue. David, are you the guy that did the 1942 map? If you are, thank you. Possible correlation between Columbia embayment and the owl. Oh, we're playing all the hits now. We're playing all the hits of things that I have purposely avoided, not because I'm afraid of it, but because I can't grab. I love to grab something that I can use, whether it's a hook into a topic or whether it truly is new work that has taken this age-old question and connected it to some real data. And the Columbia embayment and the Olympic Wallowa lineament are just these two slippery, elusive topics that after trying to think about how to use, I still cannot do it, even in this series. I always get slightly bummed when I hear people wanting to talk about it because I don't have anything meaningful to say. Speaking of that, he's still going for live questions. Bizarre. Going way back because I see all sorts of owl and it's all owl. It's all owl. Who gives a hoot? Doy. Lottie, could there be a bunch of light blue hidden beneath the current Cascades? I suppose there could be. So I tried to make the point that we have a bunch of light blue to enjoy, including the Tuck Willow, where we finished today, amongst the McDonald's Big Mac wrappers, because of the rotation that has moved the old stuff, and the younger parts of the Cascade Arc grew in a different spot. That's what I was trying to say. And Lottie says, well, okay, but can't you have the light blue be a nice wide zone? Yeah, maybe. I don't know why, though. Now, I'm realizing there's problems with how I did that. The most interesting question to me is, should I do it? Let me try it. This might be helpful. Instead of this, which I think is reality, using our color scheme, why doesn't it look like this? If clockwise rotation is happening during this whole thing, do you see what I'm trying to do? Oh, I didn't plan very carefully. Now I got the Cascades with the wrong trend. I think this is what we have, but why isn't it like this? And you're like, what are you doing? I'm trying to say that there's been a steady 50 million years of clockwise rotation during the entire history of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. This is what I think we have, but I'm wondering now why it doesn't look more like this, even though I've got the youngest volcanic arc like almost trending to the southeast, which I didn't mean to do. I think that's fun. A toast to you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, live for episode N, Early Days of the Cascades. Separate thanks to those of you who watch this in replay. Here's to you and your health of everyone in your community near and far. Here's to all of us. Our Friday noon lecture series here at CWU begins next week, not tomorrow. It's a holiday weekend. It's a 3-day weekend here in the States. So we will begin many Friday noon lectures starting next Friday. I'll remind you of that next week. Thank you. It is officially windy out there, even though it's herky-jerky wind, according to the camera. It is blowing out there, and I love wind. I live in the right place. I love wind. And I love you for joining us today. I'll see you Saturday morning at 8 a.m. for our next episode. Our last blue episode of the alphabet, Jeff Tepper centric, before we move on to the 30s. Here at Cascade A to Z Livestream headquarters. Thank you, everybody. I love you. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. I enjoyed putting it together. And thank you to the viewers who contributed their visuals. See you Saturday. Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Shelton, Bremerton, Everett, Snohomish, Stampede Pass, Snoqualmie Pass. We're heading here soon enough. Mount Rainier, Bumping River, Cle Elum, Swauk Prairie, Leavenworth, Ellensburg, Washington, USA. My God, how much wind do we have out there? Those are big trees. Hang on, let me look that up. "30-mile-an-hour winds." Wow. Oh, this came out of nowhere. Check this out. You still here? Check this out. There was none of this like an hour ago. Gusts up to 50 to 55 until 4 o'clock this afternoon.